Hi everyone, it's Reefer here, and welcome to this new Focus Friday video. Thanks again for watching. So today I'm going to discuss a subject that I have mentioned before, that is water changes, and the facts and fables regarding doing them or not doing them. So there's a lot of pros and cons, and people who do water changes and people who don't do water changes. So there's a lot of different opinions, and I can relate to both. So I'm going to try to elaborate on this subject, looking at it from both sides, which makes sense, I guess, since obviously there are very good reasons to do water changes and also good reasons not to do them. So let's start off with not doing any water changes, since that's something I have been practicing for quite a long time. So let's say regular water changes, because everybody does water changes now and again, even if it's just when removing some water or removing some dirt and then adding a little bit of new water. But with water changes, I mean minimal 10% change. So that's exactly what I did last week. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to cover this subject today. Because for the first 3 months that this tank has been running, I have not been doing water changes. My previous tank, I also didn't do any water changes for at least a year. So because basically when dosing your minerals into your tank and when using methods to remove the nutrients from the water, so removing the phosphates and the nitrates from your tank's water, there's no real need to do water changes, since on the one hand you're adding the much needed minerals to your water that your corals need to grow, which are calcium, alkalinity, magnesium, and other trace elements. And on the other hand, you're removing the dirt from the water that is there because there are fishes in your tank. The more fish there are in your tank, of course, the more dirt there will be in the water. So you need to have some kind of method to export these nutrients from your tank. So when you have both of these things in place, there's no actual need to do any big water changes frequently. So like I mentioned before, adding the minerals that your corals need to grow and survive, that's fairly easy. You can use a dosing machine or add it by hand, of course, but using a dosing machine is usually the most accurate and timely way of adding the needed minerals. There's various methods you can use on the market today. There's ATI, which I'm using, there's Triton, there's Aquaforest, of course, and there's, Fauna Marin, and various other methods that you can use to add these minerals to your tank. They're all slightly different, but in essence they're all based on the same principle: adding calcium, dosing stuff to up your alkalinity, and adding magnesium, which are the three most commonly used minerals in your reef tank. So that's on the one hand, and on the other hand, removing the nutrients, which you can also do in various ways. I'm using two methods to remove nutrients from my water, which is dosing vodka and vinegar, so it's a mix. You can also buy pre-mixed carbon sources like NO3PO4X by Red Sea, or other kind of fluid nitrates and phosphate removers. But you can also create something yourself. So I have a mix that consists of 60% white vinegar and 40% of 80 proof vodka, which I found to be a good combination. You can also add sugar if you want. It's also a carbon source. So adding carbon will reduce the nitrates in your tank, since the nitrates will attach themselves to the carbon that you're dosing and eventually be skimmed off using a skimmer, assuming you have a skimmer in your reef tank. And I'm using macroalgae. There's various algae that you can use, that you can grow in your sump or even in your display tank if you want, if you like some nice green plants in your tank. Then the different macroalgae are available to lower your nutrients. So a very commonly used macroalgae is Chetomorpha or Chaetomorpha, but I'm using Taxifolia, Caulerpa taxifolia. And the way this works is that the plants grow from the light source that you put above it, and the growth of the plants is being caused by taking in the nutrients in your water. So actually by growing, these plants remove the nutrients from your water, which is a very efficient and natural way to remove waste from your tank. So if you have these things in place, adding new stuff and removing dirty stuff, essentially, then there's no actual need to do water changes. Of course, there are also people that like to do water changes, which I completely understand. And then there's two different methods. There's people that add or that replace the water in their tank, usually around 10 to 20% each fixed period. So for example, 10% each week or 20% each month. There's various possibilities. And you can either add fresh, or not fresh water, but fresh salt water. So you can take salt water from the sea and add this to your tank. Or you can create your own salt water by buying a bucket of salt in your local reef store, local reef shop. And also then there's various brands available. Also Aquaforest, for example, but Tropic Marin is a very famous brand. Red Sea, of course, has their fair share of various salts. Reef Crystals is also a very good brand. And so while these are, using these salts is somewhat more of an artificial way of creating salt water, these salts do have a very balanced recipe of various trace elements, and of course also the calcium, the alkalinity, and the magnesium that you require. So that's a very valid way of keeping your tank healthy. So doing water changes with either natural salt water or artificial salt water is the other way of keeping your tank in balance. Of course, there are a few downsides, at least in my opinion, to doing this. So doing large water changes every period will cause the values of your water to fluctuate quite a bit, since you can imagine that if you have your tank and for a week it has been using up elements, so your corals have been growing for a week, you have used some calcium, used some magnesium, lowered your alkalinity in your water because the skeleton of your corals is growing, and then after a week you remove 10% of the water in your tank and you add 10% of fresh water or new water, which of course has new minerals inside. So all of a sudden, within a couple of minutes or within an hour, these values tend to fluctuate quite a bit, which in my opinion causes a bit of instability. Still, I have seen a lot of success using this method, so by no means is this a wrong way of doing it. It's just, I think, since we have good dosing machines these days, dosing elements is a lot more efficient, creates a lot more stability in your tank, So that's why I think that's still the best way to do tank maintenance, just by dosing and finding a way to remove the nutrients from the water. So all in all, there's no real wrong way of doing or keeping your tank stable. You can do water changes. You can add elements to your water and remove nutrients. You can even do a combination of both. So of course, people usually have a skimmer. No matter what kind of method they're using, a skimmer is always very good to have. There's also people that, in addition to having a skimmer and a dosing machine, still do water changes. It's also a possibility, so you can combine both methods. And so we can conclude that there's no real best way of doing it. I think the best way, and that's the conclusion of this video, is to keep a close eye on your reef, on your tank. Take a look at your corals, your fish. Do your fish look healthy? Do your corals grow? Are they extended? Are their polyps extended? Or are they looking miserable? And when your corals are starting to deteriorate, or your fish are starting to look unhappy, often a very good way of improving this is doing a water change. So no matter what method you're using, doing a water change now and then when you observe that your tank is struggling is always a good idea. So that's concluding why I did a water change, and I will be doing some more in the coming period. My tank has been up and running now for a few months. It has been stabilizing slowly, and doing water changes will actually help the tank to remove some excess waste, in addition to the skimmer and the algae that I'm growing. So it brings back just that little bit more, which causes the tank to be more healthy sooner. So that's the main takeaway from this video. Take a look at your tank, take a look at your corals, see how they're doing, and whenever you notice that something is not going the way you want to, consider doing a water change. Your corals will thank you, your fish will thank you, and no matter what method you're using, this is a very good, efficient way of keeping your tank healthy. So that's where I want to end this video. I hope you enjoyed the video, although it was from a particular viewpoint. Still hope you enjoyed watching it or listening to it, and I'll see you in the video next week. So bye bye for now, and have a great weekend.